Revitalize your brand and accelerate your impact with Eddy and Erica at Elevate One Consulting. Experts in organizational development, digital marketing, and much more. From leadership coaching to creating unforgettable digital experiences, we've got you covered. Visit elevateoneconsulting.com today. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Welcome back to The Unbroken Place, where it begins and ends with empathy. I'm your host, Eddy Paul Thomas, and this week I had the chance to catch up with an old friend of mine. Her name is Melissa Burnell. Melissa is passionate about improving lives through behavioral health therapy and training. She holds a Master of Science in Mental Health Counseling and works as a behavioral health therapist with adults facing various needs, including trauma, addiction, sex therapy, and other mental health issues. The topic we cover is one that impacts us as human beings on all levels: personal, professional, spiritual, you name it. The topic is the art of deep listening. We've discussed active listening before on this podcast but deep listening really takes communication to a completely different level. And I'm not sure that there's a better expert on this topic to have on this show to talk about it. So let's get it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. This was long overdue. If you don't know, we are talking to Melissa Burnell, a therapist, and we have been friends for a long time. I've known you for, since I barely had any hair on my chin back in the day. But we are discussing a topic that is very important, and I know one that you deal with professionally as a therapist, and one that I am on the cusp of digging a little deeper into as a consultant, and that is deep listening. So thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, for those who are new to you and your work, would you care to share a little bit about your background and what kind of inspired your career in behavioral health therapy?
Yeah, definitely. So I got my degree from Purdue, go Boilers, in psychology. And from there, I didn't want to move on to my master's yet. So I got in the corporate world and was in management and leadership for quite a while. And from there, I recognized that I was really good with people. And I wanted to really work with developing people, helping them achieve their goals, all of that. So that's where I flourished in the corporate world until it just didn't meet my values around how to develop people more. The arena I was in was more in sales and less about people. So I ended up quitting my job and went back to school, got a master's in mental health counseling, and decided that I just wanted to make a bigger impact in people's world with whatever they were going through. I tended to work with a lot of employees, business owners, people around a lot of difficult subjects in their life, it seemed. And so I wanted to really hone in on that and see how can I make a bigger impact and how can I help people work through and heal a lot in a more focused way. So that kind of led me into my mental health role. And as I developed in my schooling, I recognized I liked working in addictions. I also like just working with people with lots of stress. So I tend to work with also a lot of first responders. So it's just kind of flourished into that arena. And where I've really noticed is communication and how people communicate. So that's kind of what led me into all of that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Getting the opportunity to have this kind of platform where you speak with people who work in mental health. It's so interesting to figure out all of the intersectionality between communication and mental health, communication and stress and anxiety, communication and PTSD, all of the different things that go into how people perceive the world around them. And it's wonderful to have people like yourself who can help, others kind of figure out how to navigate that world, especially when you're working in high stress jobs, as you were dealing with before. I'm curious. So for me, as a consultant, I work a lot in a space of listening. You have to do or practice active listening to truly understand what your clients are looking for. You have to be able to kind of take in what people are saying and kind of feed it back to them in best ways that you can before you can jump into trying to solve their problems. So you more specifically work in deep listening. And I was wondering if you could kind of unpack that for our listeners.
Yeah. So I think in deep listening, some of the biggest things are people tend to, one, listen to respond, and two, listen with a lot of their own perspective or assumptions already. And in that,
Yeah.
when they're listening through their own perceptions or their own assumptions, it's like, what are we missing? And when we are able to kind of set those things aside, it helps us really kind of listen to what is this person in front of me saying? What is my partner saying? What's their
Hmm.
perspective? And how can I hear that perspective without making an assumption or formulating my response while I'm listening?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, let's go a little deeper on that. I think, when it comes to bringing people like yourself on who are so well versed in this particular subject, it's helpful if people can understand the impact of deep listening. Like, how can it help improve relationships and maybe in resolving conflicts?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times when it comes to communication, it's what are we hearing the other person say, whether it's a partner, a colleague, whatever that looks like. It's what is the other person actually saying and how can we grasp that? So a lot of times it's
Yeah.
listening, but then reflecting back what we heard, which is a lot of like the active listening piece.
Hmm.
Then also really setting aside that, okay, what are the emotions behind what the person's saying? What is
Mm.
the body language saying? Um, Really kind of being in that mindful space where you're able to kind of catch all that they're all that they're saying to you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It almost requires, wow, it almost requires a great deal of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And it does require individuals to, not every moment of every day or every conversation, but at least in those instances when they're focusing on deep listening, it requires mindfulness to not just understand, maybe the body language or temperament of the other person, but kind of almost um, check in with yourself, like what they're saying. How does that make you respond? Like, what is your what is it called? Somatic response. There's that body response. So it takes a willingness to really dig a little bit deeper than just setting, as you said, setting up your next argument, or next point that you need to state before moving on to the next thing. So what as you kind of think through some of those clients that you work with and even friends that you have conversations with, what are some of the common challenges people face when trying to practice deep listening, and how can they overcome those?
Distractions is the biggest one.
Mm.
Uh, we live in a world full of
Yeah.
distractions, and So you constantly hear your phone is right there. So if you feel it buzzing or you hear it, um,
Mm-hmm.
the constant attention to whatever's going on around you. So I think a lot of times distractions get in the way of feeling that somatic response or
Yeah.
actually seeing some body language from someone or listening to a point where where it's like, okay, let's figure out what are they truly talking about and how do they feel about that. Distractions is a big one. uh, Many
Yeah.
times even just not being present, um,
Mm.
which is really hard, right? Because again, we live in a world of distractions and we are constantly thinking. um, we are in
Yeah.
this mode of I have to work all the time, I have to do all the time, and people struggle to just focus in or tune in to what another person is saying.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
hard because again, there's a lot of distractions in that.
See, we could probably talk all day about our clients. Mine business focused, and yours obviously more mental health focused. But
Mhm.
it's it's incredibly hard to not be distracted in the way that the world is set up today. Um, I was having a conversation with a client. We were trying to set up their brand and how they wanted to work through that and how they want to be perceived by the world. And we were talking about the influence of just brands out there. And the numbers are in, and this was a study done 6 years ago, which in marketing is basically 1924. But let's even play with those numbers. 6 years ago, we as individuals with cell phones and with the radio and everything else, were subject to more than 7,000 brands per day. We are constantly distracted. And what makes it tough when you think about social media, and I'm ambivalent on social media. Some people are really down, like, oh, it's terrible, and some people are like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. For me, it depends on the people using the tool. Um, but for social media, you're rewarded for paying attention to the distraction. When you get the notification and you click like, or someone responds, you get that. I think it's dopamine. You'll have to
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sure.
when you get that click or the like or the comment, there's a chemical response in your brains. So we are constantly battling that distraction.
Yeah, think about like the amount of information that we take in now,
Hmm.
in today's society. It's a lot, and
Yeah.
that can be very overwhelming. But also, our brains get used to that. So
Hmm.
when we're not being consistently fed information, it's almost like we look for it then.
Right. Almost addicted to the information.
Yeah, and so it's hard sometimes for people to be mindful
Hmm.
based off of that, right? Because again, we're
Yeah.
training our brain to consistently look for information, but it's
Hmm.
always in different places. It's not necessarily with the person in front of us. So
Hmm.
it's a practice to take that information that you're gaining from that person in front of you
Hmm.
without any other information being thrown at you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly hard. I think back to um, 2020 when I was engaged and asked to be on panels and speaking and environments where people had a lot of different questions. I remember specific. I think I even wrote about this one in my book where um, a gentleman asked, "Hey, you know, I'm in Louisiana and I see all the things that are going on down here, and I'm speaking up, and I've marched once, and I stood up for the rights of people, but then I see this thing going on in Portland, and I'm so angry about it, and I don't know how to engage with that. What do you think, Mr. Thomas? Like he asked me, and I said, you can only have the biggest. Take out the word only. You can have the greatest impact where you are, creating the ripple effect where you are by listening and engaging and getting involved with local issues. And it doesn't matter the group, anyone who is underserved or discriminated against, what have you, in your local area. But when it comes to what's going on in Portland, in his example, I said the best thing for you to do is to help empower those who are already there, the feet on the ground. Um, People who understand the trauma or whatever it is that's going on in that area. Support them, promote them on social media, donate. Whatever it is that's going on over there. Support them. You don't need to drive all, you know, grab 50 of your friends and go running to Portland, and it causes more chaos than it does, solutions. And it's that last part that I wanted to kind of pick your brain on, because there's listening, there's distraction, but then there's the added, I hate to use the wrong word here. Distraction is not the right word, but when you think about trauma, I'm wondering what your thoughts are, how trauma can affect an individual's ability to listen deeply. Um, and maybe, as a spouse or partner of someone else who has experienced trauma, what kind of strategies can you offer for people who are trying to support their partner or a friend, family member, coworker, kind of unpack that for us.
Yeah. I think a big one with trauma tends to be that people who have experienced trauma tend to be very hypervigilant.
Yeah.
And in that, they're constantly, it's almost like they have a search crew in their mind and they're constantly seeking um, something to go wrong or
Yeah.
something that is, like emotion regulation can be very difficult, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times when someone is either you're communicating with someone who has been through trauma or vice versa, there could be some barriers with that.
Yeah.
And with that, it's how do we kind of hone in and check on those things for ourselves to see how can we still listen when those things are present. We have many barriers. I mean, even mental health in general can cause a barrier for deep listening because of maybe, what's going on in the brain or things that we have told ourselves or fed ourselves. Um, there's just so many different barriers, but that hypervigilance is a piece where sometimes people read into things that aren't true. And so it's a piece of how do I ask the questions? If I know that I am hyper vigilant on some things, it's that awareness, but then it's also how do I recognize, is this hypervigilance that I'm experiencing when I'm having this conversation with someone, or can I recognize like that this is body language or that this is telling me something different? Does that kind of answer that question?
Well, you tell me. I think it was great. I think it's incredibly helpful. There's that hypervigilance explains so much. Thank you for kind of digging in on that one. The hypervigilance does make sense when you think about some of the things that people are dealing with, how they process information. It has to make people feel a great deal of anxiety, just to deal with just the average everyday conversation. Um, But that I think that's a great way. Thank you for opening that up for me. Um, I know that you've also worked in addiction, right? You've counseled addiction and recovery, and I would imagine that deep listening would have to play a major role in that, not just for you, but um, family members who are dealing with addiction. Hollywood tries very hard to do a good job of unpacking that in different shows or movies about families who have to deal with that, and I think they do a fairly decent job of it. But um, you're often dealing with family members who have been through a lot, who have been lied to a lot, and you as a counselor are now asking that person to listen deeply to someone who has lied to them consistently. So it's what does that look like for you as a therapist, just trying to work through families with addiction, not just the individual, because I know that's tough, but bring in those family members. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it is hard because there is that trust factor, right? That
Hmm.
they're like, I'm not sure whatever they're saying that I can trust. And a
Right.
lot of it is how do we then build that trust? Because there has been so many lies and there has been so many um, just behaviors that are not, um, that hurt the family. And
Yeah.
so I think deep listening comes into play when someone is really hurting and someone is they're utilizing this for a reason, and a lot of times the coping, they figured out that that coping works. However, it's not conducive to living life to their fullest, right? So when, for families, deep listening can come into play when there's more to it. There's more.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times people get so defensive around, yes, this was a coping skill that I did and it is not a healthy one. I don't know any other options that work. And then that's where a family member can look at, okay, what can we do, or what type of resources can we utilize that can help you figure out what can work.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times people respond with, well, if you just quit, your life wouldn't be in shambles like this. Well, if they could have quit, they would have done that already.
Right.
So
Right.
now how how do we find that coping skill that helps? And it's hard to know that unless you actually listen and really truly understand like what's going on,
Right.
because there could be a lot of shame and guilt um, from that person, and there could just be like, I don't want to because this has worked,
Yeah.
which then in turn makes the family feel like, okay, so this is what you're choosing. um, but it's that piece of when someone feels that no one's listening, they're going to
Yeah.
continue to do the same things that they've done.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough. That's
It
really
is.
tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's I love as a consultant I get the opportunity to travel, so mostly virtually these days. I used to go all over the place, but virtually I get to travel um, and meet different people who have a lot of different, really interesting topics that they're trying to work through as an organization. Especially when they're looking through the funnel or lens of their mission and vision, like truly engaged in an ethical process, and they're working through it. One area in which I don't get to do that virtually because it's necessary to be there in person is when it comes to cultural sensitivity. Having cultural sensitivity and competence in some areas when I work with any organization that is interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, choosing board members, things of that sort. It becomes a very, I won't say difficult topic. It becomes very interesting because people are kind of learning to check their biases, not necessarily change their mind frame, but just like, oh, I didn't realize I was coming across that way. Or they're learning a new. It's almost like learning a new language. But I'm curious when you're working with clients, um, and helping them institute the practice of deep listening, um, especially in diverse communities. How does cultural sensitivity influence the way that they practice?
That's a good question. In my experience, what I've noticed is the more curious people are, the more you learn about them. Everyone, no matter what their background is, has had either a different experience or, um, I guess to put it in a way of like being curious about that person that's in front of you.
Hmm.
How does that person view the world? How does that how is that molded by their experiences through their life? And that
Hmm.
could be culturally, that could be, um, you know, location wise, like where they grew up. It could be a lot of different things. And so much goes into that just in communicating that people don't realize, like, oh, I didn't realize that because of this, then this, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's
Yeah.
more of that, how do you gain that understanding? To me, it's always been through curiosity. I mean, you know me, I've always been that way of, I have a very diverse group of friends and family, and it's that curiosity of making sure that we check our stereotypes or check our
Hmm.
prejudices or any of that in order to communicate and learn about the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's wonderful, Missy. There's, gosh, the ability, because when I was at Purdue, I studied history and sociology, so it's another book or two writing out why why I went from history and sociology to business and organizational management. Um, but the ability to check your biases is not an easy thing. It is not an easy thing, and um, I do commend you because again, knowing you for decades now, it has always been that curiosity. You've never shied away from asking questions, um, and it's a wonderful thing when you're allowed to do that. And I know that in some cultures, and I'm speaking business wise, business cultures, um, that is discouraged. You know your role, you know your place. We're paying you to do the thing. Shut up and move. Move to your desk. And it's unfortunate when that's the case, but there's I love when the light bulb goes on for organizations and they realize when you have a curious office, when you have staff that are encouraged to speak up and step into these roles of being visible in a meeting, um, there's more buy-in. Turnover drops, precipitously, and it is not even it's not even close in terms of employee satisfaction and loyalty. Um, I'm curious though. For me, when I do connect with those clients who are interested in, instituting a little more curiosity, some of the tenets of conscious leadership, because it's a slow roll. It is never a quick thing. Um, there's an accountability piece that I hold for all of my clients, which is measurement. Let's lay out these points of interest. Let's be forthright and honest in how we're going to approach it. And when I come back in 3 months, 6 months, we're going to measure how we did. We set these goals. Let's look at the measurement here. Um, I know that you probably have something similar for your clients, But I wonder when we're talking about individuals and couples who you may not be counseling, um, how would they be able to measure their progress in improving their deep listening skills?
Mm-hmm. A lot of it is measuring compassion and empathy,
Yeah.
making sure that does the person that I'm trying to communicate with, do they feel that I am offering compassion, that I'm
Hmm.
offering empathy in what they are trying to relay?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a person that's just like, man, I just feel like you really listen to me. I feel like you know me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's sometimes hard to measure, but it's a feeling that you get when you're around someone who truly is paying attention to you and really
Hmm.
like reflecting back what you're stating.
Yeah.
And it's like, and if they reflect back and it matches, you're like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly how I'm feeling, or that's exactly what I'm trying to relay. Or they'll be like, well, I hear what you said. Let me say it in a different way, and maybe it'll hit different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's that's kind of a bad answer to that, but it's a feeling, a feeling of, is this person, when I'm communicating, sharing in those same types of goals of understanding or learning,
Hmm.
and offering empathy or compassion around that.
We'll be back with The Unbroken Place in just a moment. At Elevate One Consulting, we specialize in executive, business, and accountability coaching tailored just for you. Discover the power of enhanced leadership skills, improve performance, and increase self awareness. Our expert coaches will help you navigate challenges, articulate your vision, and establish a work life balance. With Elevate One Consulting, you get proven methodologies to drive growth and success, insightful feedback and personalized strategies, clear goals, and actionable plans. Whether you're a C-suite executive, business owner, or entrepreneur, our coaching programs are designed to help you thrive. Visit www.elevateoneconsulting.com and take your first steps towards a focused future. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. And we're back. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's brilliant to address it that way. I think everything, because of what I've been doing for the last several years, it just goes towards business and how we can incorporate that. And it's one of the hardest discussions I have with them, because they come to me for strategy, and I'm happy to give them strategy, but I let them know, in the case of a sales group that came to me, um, they were wanting to know about different strategies, listening strategies. How do we do it? I said, well, here's the thing. The people who have gotten the most money out of me in my entire life have been individuals who did not come to me with the sales pitch. They listened to what I wanted, what I was trying to say and didn't quite know how to say. They would ask follow-up questions. I didn't feel like I was on a time clock, like I was wasting their time, or they had 35 other customers to get to. It was a part of a lifestyle that they have adapted as opposed to a strategy. And I lay that out from the very beginning, and it's a smoother road for most who say, okay, I get that. And we go through some very easy practices, different listening skills that they can learn, and active listening is a part of that. What you're offering with deep listening is a deeper form of that,
Mm-hmm.
that I think so many people would benefit from, and we could truly get to compassion. um, I often tell people that, if you're trying to get to compassion without empathy, then you're going to misdiagnose the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, just tell me what you're thinking, hon. Tell me what you're thinking, babe. Come on, let me fix this thing. That it's never going to work. You got to allow people time to process, and you've got to ask questions, letting them know that you're listening. And when you're listening, even more things come out, because that trust is innate from people who see that you genuinely value them.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was going to say that's a good point. There's a piece in, I remember, like, leadership of, for me, my experience is learning about the employee and what motivates them. Like, if you're trying
Yeah.
to work with people with sales, right? How
Mm-hmm.
how do they get motivated? Because everyone is
Mm-hmm.
motivated by different things. Well, how do
Yeah.
you know what motivates them until you're actively listening or deep listening to what they want? What do they value?
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had a sales group that one valued time off, right? One valued money. One valued, like a praise, right? So it's a matter
Yeah.
of recognizing, and how do you then motivate them based off of those things, because everyone is
Mm-hmm.
motivated differently. And so when
Yeah.
you look at people, or what motivates someone to want something or need something, what do they value?
Right.
How do you know what they value unless you ask those questions, or unless you get to know them in a sense that allows them to open up to you? I mean, that's vulnerable in a
Yeah.
situation of,
Yeah.
like, letting people know about you. So it's, how do you approach that with compassion or empathy to allow them to know, like, hey, I want to help you reach your goals. I want to benefit you in some way. I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
Let's figure
Yeah.
out what that looks like.
Yeah. It's one of the craziest things, if you kind of scale back to systems thinking and how the entire organism of a business works. Um, One of the things that I've experienced, or at least noticed, was if people do a good job of hiring the right person for a given position, it changes the trajectory of that organization. Um, the trust from the top down changes. The idea of a leader who can trust, this department or that department to do the job that they are brought in to do goes up, because they've taken the time and really brought in the right person, as opposed to, okay, cookie cutter, you went to this university, you got this GPA, you got this experience, come on in. Well, let's do more. Let's do this thing that Melissa was talking about, in terms of understanding their motivation. They could work anywhere if their motivation is money. Why work here? There's so many things that people could do to bring in the right people for their organizations, that I think, gosh, it is scary sometimes, just to think how quickly they try and bring in people and just move it along, and fill a cog in the wheel, as opposed to understanding the living, breathing organism that their organization is. Um, but when it comes to your clients specifically, I love everything that I'm hearing, in terms of deep listening and how it can impact a family. Well, a majority of my listeners are going to want to know, or at least hear about some proof. They need proof. So can you share any, success stories where deep listening significantly improved a relationship or an individual's mental health?
Yeah. There are a lot of them, right? Just in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes in this role, we don't get a lot of real feedback. Sometimes we do.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, the times that I do get feedback, it's amazing. Sometimes we see movement with people, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I remember I have a couple that they had some trauma in the relationship. And so they were working a
Mm-hmm.
lot on rebuilding trust and what does intimacy look like and how do
Yeah.
we move through some of this trauma, because ultimately they wanted to still be together. And it's that
Yeah.
piece of finally, like, one of the partners was like, I feel like you don't ever listen to me. You don't look at me when we talk. Like, you're always like kind of looking somewhere else, or your body is positioned like towards the wall. Um, it feels as if you're not listening. And so
Mm.
in sessions, I'll make them look at each other. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable for them to look at each other
Yeah.
in session, especially when there's a third person watching, right? Essentially. Um, but it's funny how much just even eye contact really relays, hey, I'm here and I'm present and I'm
Right.
I'm interested and involved in what we're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
it's
If
a
I can interrupt you just for a second.
yeah.
You've said this word probably 2 or 3 times now, and I know what it means, but light bulb just went off. My audience may not know what that means. So
Mhm.
you've said present. What
Mhm.
does it mean for someone to be, and I want you to come back and finish the answer, but what
Yeah.
does present mean for people?
Good question. Being present is being fully there. And I don't mean just physically, I mean mentally. Mentally,
Hmm.
we tend to think about so many other things. How many times do we get in the car and we get on autopilot, and next thing you know, we're like, oh, I was supposed to go to the store, but I was going to my kid's school, because you get on autopilot, right? You get, it's
Hmm.
this sense of I'm with this person. I'm here not thinking about anything else except for what this person is talking with me about and how we're engaging in this conversation. That's being
Hmm.
present. So again, it's
Gotcha.
about
Gotcha.
eliminating some of those distractions to really help you focus on
Yeah.
what is being said. Yeah,
Okay.
good question.
Awesome. Okay. So let's go back to your successful couple who had the unbelievable task of looking each other in the eye and actually spending a moment paying attention to each other fully. So
It's
tell us how
hard.
that worked out.
Yeah, in the beginning, it was really difficult because they felt so uncomfortable, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
this is awkward. And eventually, the more that they did it, the more that whenever they came into my office, they were just doing
Yeah.
it naturally. They weren't
Hmm.
necessarily looking at me when they were talking to each other. And I would point that out, like, hey, you notice that you're actually like doing this normally. And they're like, well, we're also practicing at home, like making sure that
Mm.
we're doing this at home too, which is, to me as a therapist, that's huge, because it can't just
Yeah.
be in the office that stuff happens. But it's
Yeah.
just that attending to the partner. It's the
Wow.
it's that
That's.
piece of, wow, I really feel like my partner is attending to me and to me only,
Hmm.
even with like kids around or work or, constant dinging from their phone or whatever that is. It's when they
Yeah.
sit down and actually connect. That's a big piece of it. And I make my couples do different things, not always just like looking at each other's eyes, but it's just that piece
Hmm.
of, how do we really feel present with each other? And,
Yeah.
a lot of it comes back to mindfulness too, with different
Hmm. Yeah.
diagnoses these days too, around like ADHD, and it's hard to focus, right? And
Yeah.
again, a lot of distractions, so it's hard to focus. So mindfulness, especially like active mindfulness practices, like tuning into all of your senses,
Hmm.
really is a big part of practicing how to be in the moment with whoever you're communicating with.
Hmm. Wow. I I try to do that. I'm very intentional about that with all of my loved ones. But one of the most rewarding times is being able to. for those who are listening, I've got an office full of chairs behind me where I get to sit down with clients and discuss projects and different things like that. But I also have space back here with video games and superheroes and whatever. And I get to sit down with my 9-year-old at least every other day or so and just pick her brain. I love being able to kind of practice that active listening with her. And I guess the conversations I have with her are more deep listening. And looking her in the eye and taking a moment and reflecting back what she's saying, putting my cell phone on the desk so it's just us and nothing else. And it's really cool to have those deep conversations with my little one. And it makes me think, kind of that, and what you're saying about this couple, the successful couple. It makes me think about the courtship that we practice in this country. And I know that we're not a monolith in this country at all. Just in general, how are we coming together? And especially those who have decided, we're getting married, we're going the long distance on this one. How do people get married and they're still uncomfortable looking each other in the eye for like more than 10 seconds at a time? Like what's missing? What am I missing with that, Melissa? What is the missing piece there? It seems odd that that's a real thing, but it is a real thing.
It is. I mean, think about the technology we have nowadays.
Yeah.
When you and I were in college, we didn't really have a whole lot of cell phones. We didn't even have much email, right? It was, if you communicated, it was face to face. And that was how we communicated. Whereas nowadays, with all of these, like here, we're on a virtual thing. It's easy. It's easier with that buffer of technology to communicate.
Yeah.
Whereas being in person, like I know even with my daughter, she's 14. I've really worked with her on too, like when we're at dinner, like especially out to dinner, you put your phone in your purse or you put your phone away.
Yeah.
Because it's that piece of how do you connect? How do you communicate? And she's gotten some good feedback from different people, like her chiropractor, of saying like, man, kids never really like ask these questions or engage like this. Or, she's very like thoughtful, or she listens, it's things like that. And so she's getting that feedback, and all of that comes back to the deep listening piece. And how do you eliminate distractions, and how do you be present with people in this age of technology, in this age of it's easier to talk to people through phones than it is to in person. I remember someone even made a comment about she shook their hand and looked them in the eye, and they're like, wow, she actually looked me in the eye. And that was like, and I was like, that's weird. And they're like, yeah, it's rare that kids these days do that. But that's a piece of, hey, I'm attending to what you're saying. I'm engaged with you, and I want to talk. And I know sometimes even culturally, looking people in the eye, that sometimes is not the thing, but at least looking in a direction of the person is important. And so I think too, that's, just keeping that in mind, but yet knowing that like you're trying to be present with the person.
Yeah. I love that so much that you brought up cultural competency. The one of the classes I taught on cultural communications back in the day, I talked specifically about that fact that, in business in this country, people are so used to shaking, looking you square in the eye and shaking your hand. And I said, what happens when you have people from different cultures who are part of your organization or they're a potential client? It doesn't just pay, because that I'm not a fan of that phrase. It pays to No, this isn't about money. It's about understanding the world around you. That it is a very good idea to understand the culture of other people or ask the questions, you know, how you would like to interact. Some people are huggers, you know, some people have a specific handshake. Like I remember going to Mexico, everybody was a hugger down there, except they didn't do it. Gosh, I don't know how to explain this for the people on the listening to the podcast, but they didn't hug this way where it was kind of a left lean and, you know, the heads are going opposite directions. In Mexico, they do it the other way. So the first time I almost kissed this guy. Like, whoa, hold on, hold on. We got to switch it up. And I was told right away by a missionary that I was visiting down there, no, we do it the other way. Oh, thank you. I had no idea. I thought I had all the customs down and what to pay attention to, how to speak to people, you know, all that stuff. But you know, just little things. Even when we were in Hawaii earlier this year, my wife and I was discovering my roots, which part of it is that Southeast Asian Polynesian group who migrated to Hawaii, and I love being called uncle. They call me uncle there, but there's also the women look down just a little bit, and it's deference, it's respect, and that's something that you have to learn and understand, because I'm like, no, you're a strong, independent woman. No, hold on, that's a completely different cultural mindset.
Yeah.
Chill out, understand that this is that culture, and it's a sign of respect and love and care. But I love, I guess I say all that because I love that you are bringing up cultural competency in respect to therapy. You know, people having different ways to connect with each other, and it's not always the way that we think. Um, I love the success story. I'm wondering if you have maybe some tools or resources for people who are wanting to learn more about deep listening and how they can kind of start to practice it in their daily life, for themselves, for their partner, for business, whatever. What kind of resources would you recommend? I know we're going to put some in the show notes, but just off the top of your head, what kind would you recommend now?
I honestly, practicing mindfulness to me, and I know sometimes that's like a buzzword for people, or it's like I
Mm-hmm.
can't meditate. It's different from that. I call it like an active mindfulness. So any sort of mindfulness practice is
Mm-hmm.
going to help you attend. It's going to help you attend to someone,
Mm-hmm.
to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, you kind of mentioned the emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of resources out there, and I'll get you some to put out there, but even
Sure.
understanding what emotional intelligence is a
Mm-hmm.
huge education piece that people can utilize to try to really
Yeah.
understand, do they have it, how can they get better at it, and how can I practice this with people that I'm trying to connect with.
Yeah.
So to me, those are the two biggest ones, to help people gain the skill and work towards deeper listening. I think to me, that's the biggest ones, or those are
Yeah.
the biggest ones.
Outstanding. Well, Melissa, this has been wonderful. You and I will continue to talk and connect, and we'll probably have a deeper conversation on a few of the things that you touched on today. I would love to um, have you back and talk about relationships with children, and you know, how
Sure.
to deal with trauma in certain situations, things of that sort. I would love to unpack some more of that with you, but for now, for people who have listened to you and want to learn more, how can they follow you or support your work?
Yeah. So the easiest way to find me right now is through Psychology Today, through
Okay.
Find a Therapist. I have my profile out there. You can email me, you can call or text, either way. I'm working on my website, so that should be up probably within the next month or so. there's a lot of
Outstanding.
content that goes into that. So
Yeah.
once I
Yeah.
have that, I can always shoot that to you as well.
Okay.
That would be
Perfect.
the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for stopping by. And as I said, I will be hitting you up again. People need to hear more from Melissa.
Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate it.
The Unbroken Place podcast is presented by Elevate One Consulting. The show is produced by Say Something Studios. Learn more about both of these in the show notes. The show's music is performed by Little Glass Men in Captive Portal. We want to thank you for being a part of the Unbroken Place community. Look for an ongoing conversation on Instagram and Facebook at the handle @UnbrokenPlace. You can also find some helpful resources at eddypaulthomas.com. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter called OK on Second Thought on LinkedIn. Until next time, one love. At the Say Something Studios division of Elevate One Consulting, we don't just build websites, we craft unforgettable digital experiences. Imagine a place where design, development, UX, SEO, and management harmonize to elevate your brand to unprecedented exposure. A place where your website is not just seen, but felt, experienced, and remembered. Our expert team, equipped with unparalleled marketing insight, turns the everyday task of website design and management into a seamless, empowering journey. With Elevate One, you're not just launching a website, you're embarking on a transformative business adventure. We meticulously design every aspect, from intuitive navigation to stunning graphics, ensuring your digital space authentically represents your business ethos. Ready to transform your online presence into a thriving digital masterpiece? Visit us now at www.elevateoneconsulting.com and start your journey to digital excellence. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Say Something Studios.